Luke Summerfield used to be of Savvy Panda, which was a Joomla shop out of Milwaukee. He recently moved to HubSpot, and I'm really excited to have him talk about growth-driven design and inbound marketing. So please welcome Luke. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. I think this is my second or maybe third World Conference, but have definitely done a lot of Joomla events over the years. And one of my favorite things is always the networking. Show of hands, who loves the networking at these types of events? Okay, so I love it too. That's also the reason my voice is a little bit rough today, so you'll have to bear with me a little bit on that. Sir Edmund Hillary. Probably one of the most inspiring men you've likely never heard of. And for those of you who are not familiar with your New Zealand history, this man set out on a journey. And he set out on a journey in 1953 with one goal in mind: to reach the peak of Mount Everest, over 29,000 feet above sea level. Now, this had been something that had never been done before. That's not to say it hadn't been attempted before. Many had attempted this journey and perished along the way. And so you could say that Edmund had his work cut out for him. So he got to work. He started assembling a team of experts that could lead him through this journey up the side of Mount Everest. Over 400 people made up his team. And he had to request budget. It was a very expensive journey up the side of Mount Everest. He had to go to the government to request a grant to be able to make this trip. And they carried over 10,000 pounds of luggage up the side of Mount Everest. Now, they also had to plan everything out. All of the camps, all of the obstacles, where they were staying and what their path was, because if they didn't, it surely meant the death of his team. Now, lo and behold, on a balmy day in March of 1953, Edmund and his team set out. They set out on that carefully mapped out plan that they had spent months and months preparing for. And things went well. They got to their first camp, settled in, started talking about how great the day was going. They moved on to their second camp. But just as they were getting to their third camp, something happened. A storm. A storm hit like none of them had ever seen before. The types of storms that had claimed the lives of the men who had made this journey previous to him. And so Edmund was desperate. He had to figure out, what can I do to save my team's life? He had to make a split-second decision. Otherwise, it would surely mean the death of his team. Now, we're going to pause there for just a second. And I want you to think about, does Edmund's story sound like something you're familiar with? If you experienced something like this in the past. Now, I've worked both internally at companies, and I've also worked on the agency side. And I've worked in the marketing departments and also the web development departments. And you know what Edmund's story sounds like to me? It sounds like a website redesign. It sounds almost exactly like a website redesign, because if we think about for a moment some of the steps that you have to go through when you're doing a website redesign, you have to assemble a team of experts that can lead you through this journey of building a website. And you have to request budget. Typical small, medium-sized businesses, $15,000 to $80,000 for a website. And you have to plan everything out, all of the deliverables, when things are due, when are the wireframes, when you hand off to the development team. And the funny thing is that this starts to look like the side of a mountain. It's also funny because typically websites 3 to 6 month journey, which is longer than it took Edmund to climb Mount Everest. So show of hands here, who here has ever embarked on one of these journeys? A website redesign, show of hands, in some level. Okay, I would assume most of us. So let's think back to your previous website redesign and think about this. What emotions did you experience during that redesign? In the beginning, in the middle, and towards the end, what emotions did you experience? So feel free, raise your hand, shout them out. Tell me what emotions when you think back to your last redesign you did. I know you all experienced it. You raise your hand. Yes, sir. Euphoria to despair. Show of hands, who else probably is around those lines? Okay, explain that a little bit. What is that transition from euphoria to despair?
At first you're very excited about new stuff, and the customers are excited, and then once you get along, it starts to drag, and then, well, I didn't mean it like this, but I want it like that, and yeah.
Has anyone ever dealt with scope creep before? So we start out excited. We have this new project, lots of ideas, and then as you get further and further along in the project, new things come up, and all of a sudden it spirals into this big frustration. Okay, what else? What other emotions do you experience? Raise your hand, just shout it. Go. Let's go. You've all had your hands up earlier. I know you've experienced this before. Yes, in the back. What's worst experience?
It was very exciting at first, and then I said, oh my God, I'm screwed up.
Oh my God, I screwed up. Yeah, it always looks like a great idea, and then it starts building and building as you go. Let's do one more. One other emotion, feeling, what as you went through this website redesign journey? Yes, sir.
Maybe fear.
Fear?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, explain fear a little bit.
If you take a project from government, and after a few months you can feel only fear that you cannot finish in the timeline.
Oh, yeah, so we talk about scoping the original project and the timelines on that.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes it is not about us. Sometimes it is because there is no good conversation between sides. And they want something, the law is changing, and something is like shit.
Yeah. Who here has ever been delayed because of a client? Okay, pretty much everyone's hand. So we were curious about this question at HubSpot. And so I sent out a survey to marketers and to web developers like yourselves, and here is what we found. We took their responses, we put it in a word cloud so you can see the most common responses, and it sounds something like this. Wow, what was that? So let's boil this down to the most common. We have excitement. We're excited, we have a new site, we have pride, we have hope. Hopefully this thing will help us. But yet equally, we have these feelings of frustration, stress, anxiety, and my favorite one down at the bottom here, which is vacation. Like, just get me the hell out of here. I need a drink on the beach. This is vacation. Who here, this sounds pretty, like you could use a vacation after your last redesign. And the reason is that all of those things we talked about, the amount of planning, the amount of budget, the amount of time and resources, it came out in the discussion, it almost always, inevitably goes over budget and gets launched late. All of the scope creep issues happen. And so my first observation from the years in the web development world is that the traditional website design process is risky. It's risky for yourselves as agencies, yourselves as developers, but it's equally as risky for your clients. All the money, the upfront cost, having to put together the team, spiraling out of control. And hopefully at some point, we get the website live. And you may look a little bit like this. So happy it's out the door. You throw your hands up in the air and you finally got the website live. Yes. Now, I want to ask a follow-up question, or I want to ask a question to this. We put all that time and energy, went through all those frustrations, we finally got the site live, we throw our hands up in the air. Think about this question. How important is the website to either your business or your client's business? Okay, show of hands if you feel like it's pretty darn important to their business. Like, what would happen if it disappeared tomorrow? How would their business fare? Okay, show of hands if it's like, maybe, it's kind of important. Okay, and show of hands if it's not important for them, not a big deal. Okay, so we're kind of all in agreement here that the website is pretty darn important for their business. And here's what we found when we asked other marketers and other web design and developers. Well, turns out they agree. So they agree, 54% say the website is a 10 out of 10 in terms of importance to the growth of our business. So we're all in agreement there. So my follow-up and more important question is, knowing that the website is important, how often do you make impactful improvements to your website? Now, I'm not talking about updating a blog, adding a blog, or creating a landing page for a new offer campaign, but actual looking at the core of the site and updating it on a regular basis. I'm going to do a poll, and just remember what your mother said about lying. Lying's the devil, you go straight to hell. So, remember your mother when you answer. How many people here, it's such a big journey, they only go to redesign or they only go to make impactful, big improvements to the site when they absolutely have to, basically when they redesign the next time around, about 2 years, give or take. Okay, good. Let's give those people a round of applause for being truthful. Like, come on, we're in a web development conference here and they're being completely truthful. What about once a year? Once a year you get in there, show of hands, once a year you get in there, you make some impactful improvements. Okay, good, good. And once a quarter you jump in, you really dig into the website, you really make some improvements. Okay, monthly, show of hands, monthly. Okay, cool. We have a very truthful crowd. I did this last week at our inbound conference, and there's a lot of not so true people. So what we found was that, generally speaking, we marketers and web developers only get in there when they need to do a redesign once every 2 years, or once a year they jump in and make the improvements. Some people are doing it quarterly. But we've all agreed this is our number one marketing asset. It's almost like our so important to our business, but yet we are not making impactful improvements. And part of the reason is, if we take a look at the traditional website design process, we typically have a site and it sits for 1.5 to 2 years. We launch the thing, we're just so happy it's out the door, we don't want to touch it again. We go back to all the things we've been putting on pause, and it sits for 1.5 to 2 years until it becomes so outdated, starts performing so poorly, we've gone through a rebrand, that we need to embark in that 3-month redesign journey where we hit all of the risks, all of the frustrations that we talked about earlier. We launch the site, we're happy, we launch it, and we go through this cycle over and over and over again, which is crazy. We're all in agreement here that your website is probably your number one marketing asset. It's where we drive all of our visitors to, it's where our paid campaigns are pushing them to, and it's also our number one salesperson, working round the clock, 24 hours a day, nurturing people through the sales process, and for many of you, closing them into actual revenue. But yet we let it sit for 1.5 to 2 years. And so my second observation from my years in the web development world is that the traditional website design process produces poor results. These two observations can be wrapped together in my thesis, which is that the traditional website design process is broken. It's usually not a lack of skill. You usually have very talented people that you're working with. It's usually not a lack of resources. I've worked on projects where they say, you have unlimited resources, just do it right. But yet we always still hit these exact same problems. It's because we're operating with a broken playbook, and we're setting ourselves up for failure before we even start the project. So you may be wondering to yourself, well, Luke, this is how we've been doing it for years and years and years, since the dawn of the internet. We've been using the same playbook. What are we supposed to do? Well, I envision a better way. a better way called growth-driven design. And growth-driven design is a smarter approach to web design that reduces all of those headaches, all of those frustrations that we talked about. How do we build a system that minimizes all of those risks? Growth-driven design is a smarter approach to web design that maximizes results through continuously learning about our users, our actual users, and then continuously improving the website based off of their behavior. And it's a smarter approach to web design that informs other departments. So as we learn about our users, as we learn about what they care about, what points of pain they're trying to solve, we can then inform the marketing team and the sales team and the product development team. And vice versa, those teams, as they're on the front lines and learning about users, they can loop back us in to make impactful improvements on the site. So let's take a look at what this methodology, what this new playbook looks like. Well, it starts off, the first step in the growth-driven design methodology probably looks pretty similar to what you're doing today. It starts with the strategy step. And really what the strategy step is, we want to gain an empathetic understanding of our users. We want to see the world through their eyes and then be able to best build a website that is integrated into that world. Now, there are a bunch of different ways that we're going to go about doing this. It's kind of, in some ways, lives in the UX world. Of course, UX is spread out through everything we do. But for sake of time, we're not going to be able to dive into each one of these in too much detail. I'll tell you at the end, I built a training course, a free training course that there's an entire class just on all these topics. So first, we want to take a look at, generally speaking, the goals. What are the goals of the website? And also, what are the goals of the overall business and the marketing department? We need to know that so that we know where the website needs to play within that. Now, once we've done that, we can then look at personas. Anyone here know what a persona is? Show of hands. Okay, lots of hands. So who's brave enough to give me a definition? Let's go.
It's like who your people are that are your target market.
Yeah, who are your peeps?
What?
Who are your peeps? Who are your people? Exactly. It's a fictional representation of your ideal customer. And you create multiple personas. You can bucket them based off of different points of pain and different characteristics. Okay, so we want to get this idea of who are these people that we are coming to our site and who are the ones that we need to be attracting. And from there, we can move on to what we call fundamental assumptions. So fundamental assumptions are essentially looking at the core of the business, the core of your personas, and the core of your website, and taking a look at what are some of these really foundational things that we may be making guesses on, and let's double check those. So for example, for your personas, what are their points of pain, and what is the deepest point of pain? Right? They may have 5 different ones, and if we speak to the wrong one, are we really going to draw them in? So what is the deepest one? Now on the business side, what's the solution that we offer that helps solve that? And for an example of a website point of pain, or a website fundamental assumption, what is the trigger point where they say, I need to find a solution? And then they go to your website. We want that moment where they say, I need to go find a solution. What is that? Because that's going to inform what kind of experience we give them once they get to the site. So we want to validate some of those assumptions before we build the website. Because if we don't, and we start building things for the wrong points of pain, or the wrong solution matchup, or the wrong trigger point, you're going to have some of that misalignment, and all the things that we want to build may not necessarily work properly. Now, once we've done that, we can then go into journey mapping. So journey mapping is essentially looking at the entire lifespan of your user, of your customer, before, during, and after interacting with your company. And that will then allow us to start wrapping together a global strategy. And when you think of global strategy, I want you to think of it, now that we know who these people are, we know what their life look like, how do we weave the website in as a part of their life to solve their points of pain? Versus the traditional model where we typically build a site, we throw it at them, and we hope it sticks. Okay, now this is where growth-driven design starts getting a bit different in process than what you may be familiar with traditional. Coming out of this, the goal is we want to create a wish list. And a wish list is 75 to 200 plus amazing ideas of things that we can build on the website to drive value to users, to solve their points of pain. Now, as part of that is solving the point of pain for the users, we as a company can start capturing a little bit of that back in terms of lead generation, trials, demos. We pull some of that back and value for the business. But really what this is about is solving for the user. And so, again, these could be site elements, these could be section or pages, these could be features, they could be integrations, all the different things that you need to do based off of what you've learned in the strategy section to provide value to the user and capture a bit of that value back for the business. Once we have that, we can move on to the second step of the website, of the growth-driven design methodology, which is what we call the Launchpad website. And really what a Launchpad website is that we want to build a site that at its core has all of those core value-driving elements for the users. It looks better than what you have today, it performs better than what you have today, but it is not perfect. The reason being is that there's no such thing as perfect. The only way that we can get close to perfect is to build something that, again, looks better, performs better, but get it out there quickly into users' hands, actual users, collect data, and start improving. And as we improve, we get closer and closer to perfect. And so really the goal here, like we said, is launch quickly so that we get actual user data to make more informed decisions. Not some case study for some other industry, not something that worked for some other client. Our actual users, what are they interested in, what are they interacting in, what's solving the points of pain, and then how can we improve from there? Now the question that I get a lot is how do you build a website quickly? That's really one of the key questions that comes up with growth-driven design. Again, we're not going to have time to go through all the different steps. I want to give you kind of the three main categories or three main methods that you can go about in speeding these up. The first one is we're going to start prioritizing that wish list. So we'll go back to the wish list we put together in the strategy, and it's all those different ideas, 75 to 200 different ideas, and we're going to do an 80-20 analysis. What are the 20% of these items that are going to make 80% of the impact to the user, the value to the user? And we pull those things to the side. But then we have to gut check ourselves. We have to say, is this a must-have for the launch of the site, or is this a nice-to-have? Is this something we could do in week 1 or week 2 or month 2 after the site is live? Or is it essential to the launch, right? So we check ourselves and we say, okay, we know these are important. Are they must-haves or nice-to-haves? Or can we do them a little bit later? And anything that is a must-have gets placed back at the top of the wish list, and essentially what you're doing is you're putting together your roadmap for after the site gets live. And what you're left with is the core features that are going to be built into this Launchpad website. Now again, that is one way of prioritizing your wish list. One way of speeding up a Launchpad website is to prioritize your wish list. It's not all necessarily, not a good fit necessarily for all sites. Some sites are very complex, they're very big. There's other things you can do to speed up the launch of a Launchpad site. For example, you can tailor your approach. So what I mean by tailor your approach, let's take a step back here and think about this for a second. Who here knows a little bit about the investing world, like how to make investments? Okay, so I'll give you a little lesson on the Investing 101. You have two businesses. Business A, you put $1 in or €1 in, and $2 or euros come out. That's a pretty okay investment. Investment B, you put $1 or euro in, and let's say you get $10 out. Much better investment. Who here would put all their dollars in business A? Who here would put all their dollars in business B? Show of hands. It's not a trick question. I'm going to get to the point. Okay, so business B, show of hands. And people who don't put their hands up, you don't like making money? That's fine. You can leave it for all of us. Diversify, okay. Well, for me, I would want to put all my dollars in business B. And it sounds like a trick question, but the point I'm trying to make is that it's so crystal clear with investing where we should be investing our time and energy. But as an agency or as a web development team, there's a resource that's more important than, more scarce than money, which is our time. And we don't take that same mentality to investing our time into places on the site. And so when we talk about prioritizing your approach, you're going to do an audit of the existing sites. And you're going to bucket the pages based off of high impact pages, medium impact pages, and low impact pages. And the impact is in relations to the original goals that we set out in the strategy. How likely are these pages going to help us get to our goals? From there, we can then tailor our approach for each page. We're going to have a different process. So for the high impact pages, I know that it's worth me investing more of my time into those pages because historically they result in more impact to our goals. So you may do wireframing, you may do prototyping, user testing, all the way down the list until you have these fully built out pages, and it's worth your time to do that. Whereas on the low impact pages, maybe it's just a straight content migration, cleanup of CSS so it's all styled correctly, and that's all you do for the launch of the site. You can always come back after the site is live and revamp some of those medium and low impact pages. So again, an example, one high-level example of how you can tailor your approach to building the site to speed up the process. And the last one is investing in internal efficiencies. Some examples of that is switching from a waterfall-based process to a Scrum or Agile-based process, where you and the client or you and your stakeholders at the company are synchronizing your schedules, you're working in sprints, and you're not having that delayed communication back and forth, you're all synced up. Again, that's a whole separate topic, but that's an example of investing in internal efficiencies, make your company more efficient. Another example is investing in things like different project management tools, collaboration tools, so that you don't, again, have that delay. You can keep the trains running on time. Now, the goal for the strategy and the Launchpad is 45 to 60 days. This is the phase one, the foundation phase. Let's get something that looks better, performs better, out there so that we can start collecting data. Now, of course, the timeline is going to be dependent on the size of the site. It may end up being a 3-month foundation phase, and that's okay. But what we want is we want it faster than if we did the traditional process. Okay, so now that we have the website live, we can start looking at the third step of the methodology, which is the continuous improvement step. And really here, this is where we can start collecting actual user data. How are people actually behaving, our actual customers? Start thinking of what other high impact areas can we invest our time into, and then start continuously improving the site for better results. So we already talked about investments, but one of the challenges is that once you've launched a site, and I've been there myself, again, it was at a Joomla shop for years and years and years. We would launch a site, and we didn't really know where we should best invest our time. There's literally thousands of improvements you could make to the site, from images to colors to changing number of form fields, all kinds of different things, navigation. And so what ends up happening is it's hard to know where you can invest that time and energy. So to help with that, I put together what we call the website hierarchy. And the website hierarchy you can really think of as like your roadmap. This is your path for building a peak performing site. And this is going to allow you to provide focus to not only your team, but focus for your client or stakeholders. Where can we at this given moment focus 100% our energy to get the best output? It also allows you to set expectations on what you should be working on, and equally as important, expectations around why you're not working on other things or what you should not be working on. And lastly, it allows you to measure progress. So in a minute, when we go through the steps, right, it's not just an orange box. I'll show you, there's more to it. I'll show you the steps. There's a metric that there's metrics you measure at each step. And that will allow you to report back the progress you're making as you're building the site, as you're building a peak performing site. So the first step in this is the audience step. Does anyone have idea? So the audience step, the goal in the audience step is to get a fresh flow of unique visitors coming to the site on a regular basis. Again, the focus metric, the metric we're going to measure, is unique month-over-month visitors. Pretty straightforward. Anyone have an idea why this is the first step in the website hierarchy? Any guesses? Shout them out. Totally. We need data from our users. We need people coming to the site so we can start understanding how they're behaving. And also, we're not going to be able to see the impact of our changes unless we have new people coming on a regular basis. We can't run some experiments. We can't check the process. So that is why that is our first area of focus. We set a goal for unique month-over-month visitors, and we work like hell to hit that goal. And once we hit it, we can move on to the second step of focusing our time and energy around value. So value is, now that we have people coming to the site, do those people find the things on our site helpful? Does it help solve points of pain? Is it the right point of pain? Or is it, it's kind of, the message is getting missed, it's kind of useless clutter, it's not really that interesting to them. We need to double check and gut check ourselves here that the things that are on the site are in fact driving value to our users. And again, there's a metric you can measure. Typically, you'll use something like a little NPS that comes up. How likely would you recommend this tool to a friend or to a colleague? How likely would you recommend this content to a friend or colleague? So we have people coming to the site. They're finding value. We've worked hard at the value step to make sure everything on the site provides value to them. Next, we can really focus our time and energy on usability. And really what this is when someone's coming to the site, we know there's things of value. Usability, the goal is how quickly do they find that value? So how do we make it the site intuitive, easy to use, so that they can unlock that value as quick as possible, shorten the time to value as quick as possible? We want those light bulb moments going off as quick as possible. Now we have people coming to the site, they're finding value, they're finding the value very quickly. Now we can start focusing our attention on conversion rate optimization. Now everyone has their own definition of conversion rate optimization. I'll give you mine. So on the site you have paths that users take from start to finish, right? From the very first step, they go through steps of the site to eventually some type of behavioral event, some type of conversion. And at the conversion rate optimization step, our goal is to reduce the amount of friction in that funnel, or reduce the amount of steps that happen in that funnel. Now again, there's a focus metric you can measure for each one of these. Now, I want to pause there for a second and explain why I call this the website hierarchy. These are in a very specific order for a reason. Think about this for a minute. Typically, I see people launch a website and they jump right to conversion rate optimization. They're spending their time and energy on landing pages. They're spending time changing the form fields around and all of those things to try and get that last step of the conversion funnel to increase. But if we skip the value step and we're spending time, energy, resources trying to do conversion rate optimization on something that no one cares about in the first place, you're going to have very, very small gains compared to the global gains you could get if you just created things people actually cared about. Right? So it's very important that we don't skip over some of these steps because there's a reason that they're in this order. All right, so we have people coming to the site. We know the things on the site provide value to them. They care about it. We're getting them there quickly, and they're unlocking it, and they're going through those funnels. The next step is stickiness. Do they go through all of that and then never come back to the site again? Or do they become addicted to the site, come back on a regular basis to solve other points of pain during their journey that they're taking, during the journey that we talked about in the strategy? Okay, so here we're going to be measuring how often in a 30-day or 60-day window does a user return back to the site. And the window size is going to be dependent on that particular site. Every site is a little bit different. Okay, next, personalization. So people are coming to the site. They're finding value. They're finding the value quickly. They're going through the funnel and converting. They're coming back to solve another point of pain. Now at the personalization step, we start looking at how do we provide a better personalized, tailored experience for those people that are arriving on our site. How do we make things more contextual for them? Whether it be by geographic region, by persona, by life cycle stage, we want to try and show the content that is relevant to them. I always explain it this way. If you think about your home page, most home pages have a variety of different people visiting them. It could be a brand new person, the first time they've ever seen your company before. They get experience A on the home page. It could be someone who's been talking to a sales rep. They're talking to a sales rep, they're pretty familiar, they've downloaded things, they go to the home page, they get the same experience A. It could be a customer, someone who's closed their first sale with you. They're already familiar with what you have. They go to the homepage. They get the same experience A. Or it could be a lifelong customer, someone who's been with you forever. They go to the homepage, they get the same experience A. They say that they see the same call to actions, they see the same content, although they should be getting very different content. So here is where we can spend the time and energy focusing on improving that for our users coming to the site. Next is assets. Okay, so assets, anyone know a definition of an asset of a business? If we think of our businesses as a whole, what are assets of a business? Let's yell them out. Say that again? Clients are an asset. Your book of business is definitely an asset. What else? What did you say, sir?
I was thinking capital assets.
So if we break, okay, so capital assets, yeah, it's kind of the same bucket. What other assets, when you think of assets, what are assets of your business? Employees could be an asset of your business. What else? What about computers? You have computers, you have technology. You could, if you're a trucking company, it could be your vehicles. These are things that hold value to your business. And very much like your business has assets, your marketing department also has assets. So your email list is a big asset for your marketing department. Your social following is an asset. Your blog is an asset. We talked about your website being your biggest asset. Things that hold value to your marketing department drive value to your business. So at this point, we start thinking about how do we build more new assets for our marketing department. I'll give you an example. We have a site called websitegrader.com at HubSpot, and you can put your website URL in there. And what it'll do after is it will give you a detailed report of some of the things you're doing really well on, and some of the things you could probably improve on your site. Now, this is something that our users, like people coming there, would probably pay a couple dollars for, but yet we offer for free. And so they get value, the users get value from it, and in turn, HubSpot ends up getting value in terms of trials, startups, lead generation. We get some data about where people are struggling on their website. It's a win-win situation. Another example, Moz. Anyone familiar with Moz? They're like an analytics, SEO analytics tool. They have a Google algorithm history log. So part of their site that shows all the different places. Anyone use this before? Like kind of keep an eye on what Google's been doing? This is something that's been helpful for people. Go-to spot anytime there's any changes. I would probably pay a couple bucks because they're saving me from the time of having to research it. They point me in the right direction, but yet they offer for free. So it's this kind of JBaird utility idea of how do we build things on the site, tools, resources, maybe educational sections, things that hold value to users we offer for free, and of course we get lead generation out of it. And lastly, promoters. When we have someone who goes through this whole process, they're coming to the site, they're finding value quickly, they're going through the funnels and converting, they come back and convert again, they have a personalized experience and they're taking advantage of our resources. How do we get them to come and tell other people about it? How do we get them to bring coworkers along for the ride? So we will focus on building things on the site that help facilitate that. Now that we know this, so again, this website hierarchy is really about focus. It allows us to basically say where should we be investing our time and energy to get the biggest impact at this given time. But in addition to that, we also have steps that we go through. These are the process steps, the step-by-step process we go through while focusing our time and energy. And this is the continuous improvement cycle. It goes hand in hand with the hierarchy. And the cycle starts off with the planning step. The goal of the planning step is to determine where should we focus our time and energy, and then what are the most impactful things we can build at this given moment to get us closer to our goals. Let me give you a kind of a walkthrough on how this step of the continuous improvement cycle works. Again, each one of these steps has a focus metric. It's the one metric that we're laser focused on trying to increase. So we'll use usability as an example. So in the usability step, we have a focus metric which is task completion. So we want users to take a task, do a task. Could be going from your home page to your product page. It could be clicking on a call to action, getting deeper on the site, using your menu, whatever that action is. But then there's some questions that come up. What's preventing users from doing that action, from completing that action? What's distracting from them? What mobile devices are dropping off the most? Really what we're looking at is how do we, when we look at that focus metric of task completion, let's ask ourselves some questions about why they're struggling. And of course, we need to spin those into questions we can go out and ask users, right? So we can start collecting some data. So we have our questions. Once we have our questions, we can move into research. This could be qualitative, quantitative, or observational research. And the method of research that you use, surveys, click heat maps, scrolling, user interviews, user testing, whatever method you choose will be dependent on the question you're trying to answer and the audience that you're trying to communicate with. Okay, so you do some research, but the goal of the research is to uncover the answers to those questions. A lot of times users won't come out and tell you. You need to be smart about digging deeper and trying to uncover the answers for yourself. And once you have that, you can then move into brainstorming. So you have the questions, you've kind of researched to understand what's preventing them from completing those tasks for that focus metric. Now you brainstorm all these great ideas of things you can build on the site to remove that impediment and improve the usability of the site in this case. Now you have some good ideas, you have some bad ideas. That's going to always happen. So your team can prioritize those based off of high impact, medium impact, and low impact. Again, the impact is in relations to the goal, the focus metric we're trying to improve. And for all of our high impact items, we're going to actually go back to 6th grade science class. And we're going to go through the scientific method. And we give a hypothesis statement. It sounds something like this. This is an actual hypothesis statement from HubSpot.com, our old version of our site. We just relaunched it a few days ago. For Marketing Mary, that's our persona, visiting the homepage, that's the page we're focusing on improving, we believe that changing the funnel tool graphic, that's the current item on the site that we observed problems with the users, into a interactive and linked graphic, that is the idea that we brainstormed to implement, will increase homepage to product page visitor flow by 5%. That's the task, the focus metric that we're trying to increase and how much we're going to increase it by. We believe this to be true because, and this is where you cite some previous research, this could be a previous experiment, so that we know why you, in fact, believe this hypothesis statement to be true. Now, there's some housekeeping that needs to happen. You need to put an impact score, essentially how impactful will this be, how much effort is required. So you could have 2 items that are going to have an 8 on an impact score, but yet one you can get done in a day, and one is going to take 2 weeks, right? So you prioritize the one you can get done quicker, higher. And then lastly, your experimental design, which is a scary word for essentially how are you going to set up something to measure whether you were correct or not. So whether that be A/B testing, multivariate testing, it could be cohort analysis. There's lots of different ways that you integrate those things in. I think there's a misconception on where A/B testing fits in. All A/B testing does is fill in that last bottom right is the way you test your experiment. There's a lot of steps that we just talked about that need to go in before you actually set up the A/B test. All right, so we have our high impact pages here. We move on to the build step. This is probably what you're all very familiar with. This is the everyone as a team works together essentially to implement those high impact action items, and it's an all hands on deck sprint to get shit done, to build these things and get the things out there. We set up the experiments to be able to test and measure whether these new things that we're building on the site have the intended impact that we want. And once we've done that, we let them run for a bit. And we can move on to the learning step. So at a period of time, you go back and you essentially take a step back and you say, what happened? Did they perform the way we thought? Yes or no? And if not, which oftentimes it doesn't, especially when you're first starting out, the more important question is, what did this teach us about our users? What did we learn about our users? Because as you go back through this cycle and you move back to the planning step, you're going to be smarter about the things you brainstorm, about the questions to ask, if you reflect and ask yourself, what did we learn about our users for next time around? And then lastly, it's important that you publish your findings. You document this. There's a very simple system for documenting all of this, because imagine if you're learning things about your users, you're making improvements, and the person who's running that leaves the organization. All of a sudden, all those things that they learned about their users is out the door and you got to start over again. Also, other teams may be interested in. Your stakeholders may be interested in what you're doing and what you're learning. So it's important that we publish our findings. And then lastly is the transfer step. So here is how do we take those learnings, those things we know about the user, that we've learned about the user, and how do we start collaborating and sharing those with other departments. So you could create recommendations based off of what you've learned. Let me give you an example here to illustrate this. Has anyone ever heard of the HubSpot tool Signals or Sidekick, or now we call it HubSpot Sales? Anyone ever heard of that, the little email tool? Okay, so we have a tool that you can install into Gmail, and it does email tracking and all that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of tools that do that. When that team first started, they were building the homepage of the site, and they were curious about a fundamental assumption. And the fundamental assumption is which trigger causes our users to take action. So the first trigger they wanted to dig into was a social trigger, or social proof, which is the trigger basically that we like to follow what other humans are doing because those other humans have likely validated it's a good path to go. So that was one trigger. So what they did is they went to the Google Chrome store and they took a screenshot, just using a screenshot software, of the number of reviews and the stars that we had. They put that as the main homepage with the small sign up for your trial button. Took literally 20 minutes to put together. They wanted to test the second trigger, which was authority, where they found someone in the industry who is an authority to give a testimonial about them using the tool. So they put that together, emailed someone, got a testimonial, put that on there, took a half hour to put together. And the last one is features and benefits. So they listed the features and benefits of the tool with a button to start. So those are the three triggers. And what they found was that for our audience, for our actual users, the trigger that caused the most behavior, the most sign up, was overwhelmingly social proof. The social, seeing other people using the tool and having good experiences with it. So the web team said, we know that about our users now. I bet you that the marketing team would like to know that. So they created some recommendations about incorporating social proof into the landing pages, into the emails, into the call to action buttons, and so that the marketing team can improve their marketing based off of that little nugget of knowledge that we have about our users. Now, you may have some questions that didn't get flushed out during all of this about your users, so ask those people that are on the front line, the customer support reps, the sales reps. Ask them questions so that you can get smarter about your users the next time around. And this is a cycle. So we're going to repeat this cycle, everything we just talked about, on each one of the steps of the hierarchy. You're going to continue to build actions where you're focusing that time and energy, and until you hit that goal focus metric, and then you can move on to focusing your time and energy, increasing another. Now, that's not to say you're just disregarding all of that, right? So it's not saying, well, I'm not thinking about usability this entire time. But when you invest time and energy, it's where you're laser focused on everything you build should increase it, right? It's the idea of doing something and knocking it out of the park versus doing a little of everything and not really doing it well. Who follows me on that? Okay. So, wrapping up here, if we look at the growth-driven design methodology, we start with a strategy. Again, this is a view into your user's world. Then we're going to build a site that looks better, performs better than what they have today, provides value to the users, more value than what they're getting today, but is not perfect because we're going to launch it quickly and get into the continuous improvement where we focus our time and energy in certain areas of improvement and have a detailed cycle that we go through so that every single month, when we go from this 2-year-long iteration cycle of traditional web design, we now have a month-by-month continuous improvement. And then you start to capture opportunity that's not even possible with the traditional model. Now, of course, marketing and sales lives on top. I like to say growth-driven design is kind of like a Ferrari, but you still need gas for that Ferrari to go. And so you really need to have a program that incorporates not only growth-driven design, specific activities, but also marketing activities to drive people to the site in the first place, and also the sales activity to close them into actual revenue of a business. All those three pieces working together is how you can help grow the business. And some of these things that we talked about earlier, when we compare the two processes, the two methodologies, now, instead of all these upfront costs, you now spread the costs out over time. You're launching quick and improving. It's not this big 6-month, 8-month long project that ends up all those frustrations and things we talked about happen. You're launching quickly and improving. This is built off of an Agile backbone. So some of you who are familiar with Agile Scrum methodology, some of this sounds familiar. That's the backbone on which growth-driven design process is built off of. So because of that, you're now launching things on time and on budget. You're not using assumptions. You're not using case studies. You're not making guesses. You're using actual user data to inform how to improve the site month over month over month. And again, you're continuously improving. Let's go back and touch base with Edmund to wrap up here today. Last we left off Edmund, he was in a predicament. He was in the storm of his life. And he knew that he had to do something quickly to save his team. It was getting worse and worse. And all the moments, in this moment of most desperation, all of a sudden, a light bulb went off. And Edmund said to himself, look, I don't have to follow this carefully mapped out plan that we spent months and months and months preparing for. I can take in different data points, things like visibility, like team's morale, what obstacles are in our way, how much snow is coming down. And based off of all those, I can make a moment-by-moment decision how to proceed up the side of Mount Everest. And lo and behold, on May of 1953 at 11:30 a.m., Edmund and his team reached the peak of Mount Everest. So I want to leave you here today with a quote from Edmund. And he says, I will come again and conquer you, because as a mountain you cannot grow, but as a human I can. And that is what I ask of all of you today. To grow as a web developer, to grow as a web designer, to grow out of the broken traditional web design process, and to start building peak performing websites using growth-driven design. Thank you very much. Now, some of you are probably curious, cool, this makes a lot of sense. I want to learn more, and I want to start doing this on my own site. So I'm going to leave you with two kind of takeaway homework action items if you're interested. The first one is at HubSpot, we launched a tool called HubSpot Free. It's a free, you just put a JavaScript code in just like Google Analytics. It's at bit.ly/HubSpot Free. And here's what this tool does. So the first thing is it'll allow you to do some basic lead capture. So right out of the gate, you have abandoned pop-up forms, you have slide-up forms, all those things. Get people into a database. And from there, you start collecting contacts. But here's where the interesting part is. We talked about growth-driven design being a user-driven process. We need to know how those people are interacting with our site. So you get to see actually how those people are interacting with your site. What pages they're viewing, when do they come back, when do they not come back, where they came from, and then you can use that information to, again, help inform how to improve the site. So that's a free tool that we have. If you're interested in learning the deep dive on all of this, you can go to growthdrivendesign.com. And we have 2 courses there. The first one is for marketers or developers that are internally at a company. So if you work at a company, you can go to this course and learn all the deep dive. If you're at an agency, we actually have a certification. So I put together, it's 13 and a half hours. It's 13 classes long. There's a class on every single one of these topics. There's tools, there's templates, there's resources in both of these, Excel spreadsheets that guide you through every step of the process. Lots and lots of stuff to help you understand more of this methodology and how you can start implementing it at your business. So those would be kind of my takeaways. If you want to learn more, go there. If you're looking for a tool that can help you in kind of the process, you can use that HubSpot Free. So thank you very much.